Something surprised me recently and I just had to tell you. Let's roll the intro because I can't wait. Hey, Vlad here from ZIO.com. Welcome to another video. Recently I've been onboarding a junior, so expect a lot of beginner-friendly videos. This one is about ZIO. In particular, it's about its bifactorial nature, which is used for error handling. Now, I have an entire free course here on YouTube about ZIO, and also I have made several videos about error handling, whether it's with ZIO, cats effect, tagless final, MTL, you name it. So what is this video about? Well, this video is about the fact that it's one thing to understand something, yet it's another thing to feel it. As already mentioned, something happened that kind of shocked me, and I'll tell you all about it right after the message from our sponsors, scholarjobs.com and rustjobs.dev. Be sure to check out the links in the description below if you're looking for a job. This video is also brought to you by awesome people like yourself who support me on platforms like Patreon, GitHub sponsors, or the YouTube membership program. Your contributions go right back into this channel. They allow me to pay for a video editor or free some of my time, which I then again spend with you, whether it's during live streams or answering your questions on Discord. There's many of you and only one of me, so all it takes is $1. Huge shout out to my highest tier patron, Fred Albio. Thank you. All right, so this is what happened. I got this junior and I'm showing her the ropes, and we're trying to do everything by the book. We pair all the time, we talk about strong types, the importance of testing, writing tests first, the trade-offs of TDD, user stories, the whole 9 yards. And so we were working on this simple feature, right? It's a simple form. In fact, it's so simple, it contains only one field, right? You put in some name. At the end of the day, we create an item in the database, right? We go through some basic validation. I minimize it for you. So in the example that I'm going to show you, I'm just checking that the string is not empty, whereas in production, we're actually using a regex. Now, we did the most pedantic version of TDD. As already mentioned, I wanted to do everything by the book. So we started out with a class called business logic. Inside of it, we had a method called create. It would take in a form which would contain only the name, and then it would simply return an item. Then we realized that the name might not be valid, and so we changed the return type to an option. An option is perfect to represent one error or a success value. Then we realized that the name might be unique, and so if it is valid and we try to store it in a database, there might be an exception. And so we switched the return type yet again from option to either, because either is perfect for modeling several errors. So there we were. We had our tests, they were all passing. We had this create method that would return an either, and then the time came to introduce ZIO. So let me show you the code, how it was before we introduced ZIO. Okay, so this is a Scala 3 project. Actually, at work we still use Scala 2. It was created based on one of my Jittered templates. And there's only one thing that you need to know about the build is that I'm a big fan of this -y imports flag. And so we include ZIO in there, which means that in every file I can use ZIO without importing. Okay, this is all the code, right? So it's like 23 lines. Fits perfectly onto one page, right? So this is just a class business logic. It requires some persistence, which is just a trait over here. It has a method called save. It will take a valid form, right? So we have a notion of a form and a valid form. Again, just a single field was a name. At work, we actually use, refined types, new types and all that stuff. Over here, I just simplified it for you, right? So when we save, we either return a duplicate name error, or we actually successfully store the item, and therefore, we assign a UID to it, and then we return the item, right? So the errors are a simple enumeration. By the way, notice that this is not the classic example that you would see in every functional programming error handling tutorial. So this is not the use case where we're accumulating errors, right? So either the name is valid, then we try to save it, right? So it's only 3 cases, right? So either the name is not valid, then we're not even trying to save it. Then the name is valid, we're trying to save it, but we're failing because the name needs to be unique and there's a duplicate. And the third case is when, it actually goes through the whole thing and actually saves it. All right, so we're creating a form. A form is just something that has a name, and then either it will return an error, right? So it can either be this error or that error, or the success, right? So these are the 3 cases. Okay, so we validated the name. Again, at work we use regex and refined types and whatnot. Over here it's a simple either, right? So if the name is not empty, well then we're just gonna wrap the name into a valid name. If it's not valid, then we're gonna return error invalid name, which is over here, just another case class that contains the name. Okay, so we have a simple for comprehensions because we're inside of the either monad. So we validate the name by getting the name out of the form. By the way, in production systems, you should always at least trim the name, but this is just an example. So here we have a valid name. Then we do persistence.save. We wrap the valid name into a valid form, right? So we go from a form to a valid form, the same as we go from a name to a valid name. And then this finally saves the item, right? It assigns the UID, and then we get the whole item, right? So this is the whole example. And now the time came to introduce ZIO. So again, there we were. The whole example was working. We had a bunch of tests. They were all green. the time came to introduce ZIO, and I was about to roll up my sleeves and take ZIO apart and show how you would do this without this dedicated error slot, right? The bifunctorial error slot. And so I started to write a phone comprehension that would be nested, and then I wanted to introduce mono transformers, and then I would flatten the for comprehension, and then I would show that it's still cumbersome, and then I would explain how to do this with ZIO. And I kind of started doing it, but then I stopped almost immediately, and I said the following. I said, okay, let me try one thing. If it's going to work out, I'm going to explain it to you. And if not, then we're going to go, do the long route. Okay. This is literally what I did. I said, okay, let's find the either. Let's change go next to IO, which is an alias. Let's do it again. Okay. Let's go over here because over here, this is not the type. This is a companion object, and the companion object IO doesn't exist anymore. I put a Z over here, and that's it. This is not some, metals freaking out or anything. This code compiles, right? So we just went from either to ZIO, okay? Look at this diff. How beautiful is that? We just went from an either to ZIO by literally changing 4 lines. And I got away by hand waving and saying something like, well, there is an either inside of ZIO. Let me switch to the code again so that you can see the whole thing. Can you imagine how much time was saved and how much pain was avoided by using a library that has a dedicated slot for error handling? This alone is enough of a reason to choose ZIO for your next project. And by the way, I should probably mention that this video is not sponsored by ZIO or ZiVerge. It's just an opinion of some guy on the internet. All right, now I'm always trying to make my videos shorter, so we're almost done. Allow me just to mention a couple of things before I go. Firstly, if you're not ready to give up on Tagless Final, but at the same time, you also don't want to give up this dedicated slot to handle errors, I highly recommend that you watch my video about error handling, in which I mentioned a library called Izumi-BIO, which gives you pretty much a Tagless Final type classes for bifunctors, and actually even trifunctors. All the links are in the description below. And the second thing, allow me to actually create a work in progress commit over here real quick. I want to show you how awesome union types are in Scala 3. So if you were in Scala 2, your persistence library, right, like the real persistence library, especially if it's like ZIO aware, like Quill, for example, it will probably return a throwable in the error channel. So there are basically 2 ways to handle this, right? Either you handle it at the very bottom, by doing something like or die or doing a catch all, or you propagate it to the top. But if you're propagated to the top, you kind of need to like create an anonymous union between like these types and the throwable, right? And so in Scala 2, you'll probably end up having some nice looking type alias, something like throwable or, right, which is just going to be a type alias for either. And in Scala 2, you can't have top level definitions, so you're going to have you're going to put this in some companion object, okay? So you're going to have this, and then over here, instead of error, right, so you're going to be throwable or error, right? Same thing over here, throwable or, like this, and therefore, you need to wrap this one into the right, because on the left, there would be an error, right? So this either basically has, errors on both sides. It's just that on the left, it's going to have a throwable. On the right, it's still going to have an error. And over here as well, I'm going to go throwable or, so that's pretty much what you would do, right? So this is now an IO of a throwable or a duplicate name error. Or, if it's actually going to succeed, then it's going to be an item, okay? And in Scala 3, this is much nicer, right? Because we have union types, right? So let me throw this out. And let me go back here. You can just go at any point over here, and you can just go like this, or throwable, right? And therefore over here, it's also going to be or throwable. And I believe this should be enough. Yep, that's already enough. So you don't need to, you don't need to wrap anything here, or, to do a map error over here. I just changed 2 lines, but, this is the diff, right? Let me go like this. Okay, you just do like or throwable. Union types are awesome. In fact, the whole Scala 3 is such a breath of a fresh air. Cool, and that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this one. Check out the previous one, and I see you in the next one. For now, as always, it's been Vlad from devinside.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you wish to contribute to tech education, please consider doing so on platforms like Patreon, GitHub sponsors, or by clicking the join button below, and thus watch my videos before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.